Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Now and Men, the podcast about men, masculinities, and gender equality. I'm Stephen Burrell, and I'm here with Sandy Rexon as always. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Stephen. Now, today we're speaking to Luis Lineo. We know Luis because he works at the secretariat for MenEngage Europe. So MenEngage being a global network of civil society organisations working with men and boys for gender equality.
Yes, and Luis lives in Sweden and also works for an organisation called Men. And so Men is a leading organisation in Sweden and in Europe more broadly, working on preventing men's violence against women and a range of other masculinity and gender equality issues.
And Luis is a busy man. He's been working as a journalist and sexuality educator, engaged in gender equality issues for over 15 years, I think. He was also born and raised in Ukraine and lived there for the first 12 years of his life. So for all these different reasons, we thought it was a really good and important time to talk to him for Now and Men. So, hi, Luis. Thanks so much for talking to us today.
Hi, Sandy, and hi, Stephen. Really nice to see you and hear you.
Okay, to start with something very topical, I believe you still got friends and family in Ukraine. So no doubt it's been and remains a very stressful situation for you and for those you know, particularly those in conflict areas, but also for those who've had to flee their homes. So I'm wondering to what extent you've been able to maintain contact with your friends and family in Ukraine.
Yeah. Sure. The first days of the war, that was really dreadful. And all the situations are really, really awful in many ways. And I tried to connect to my friends as much as I could, to all the loved ones that I have. But it was really, I couldn't quite work, to be honest, with this situation. So, but then after a while, we actually got a family from Ukraine coming in, and they are living in with us currently since it's almost 2 months now, actually, I think. So that they've been here with us. So it's so it's getting. The war is really close to me and to my family and to my friends, and it got actually, to be honest, a bit easier for me when this family came into our lives here in Sweden. So, but now it's back again. I don't know. It goes back and forth, I would say, with the feelings and I feel helpless, and don't know what to do. And actually, to be honest, also one of my best friends that I've kept in touch with, I actually haven't talked to him since first day of the war. So I'm not able to get in touch with him, and I know he's been in Mariupol for a while. So I'm not trying to get into that, to think too much. I know he's been gone before and then came back. So I'm really hoping for that he will suddenly appear again.
Right. Oh, that must be truly upsetting for you. But I'm wondering also how it feels to see the devastation that's being wrought on the country by the Russian invasion. I mean, you obviously knew it at a very different time, but that must be.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's when you talk to your friends and they're in the middle of it, it's like you don't know what to do and how to help them. And you hear the bombs are falling where your school is or where you used to live, and it's like it gets really, really close to you. So some of them are getting into the army or trying to in some kind of forces. Some of them are fleeing the families. And most of because I was born in the western Ukraine, but I lived in Kiev for like 10 years. So most of my friends are in Kiev, and to be honest, most of them are actually working and trying to have it as normal as possible. But some of their families actually in the western of Ukraine, if they haven't left the country. So the families are split up. Most of the families are split up right now. So most of the women and children are in the western parts of Ukraine or in Kiev or left the country. And the friends and people I know in the eastern part, all of them that I know either haven't got in touch with them or they have fled from the eastern parts.
Right. I mean, going back a stage, I wonder if you could say something about how your life and what were your experiences like in Kiev when you were growing up. How was that? I mean, that was under the Soviet Union, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I was born in '76, so it was Soviet Union prime time, I would say. No, well, so I was like my parents are from Chile, so they were students in the Soviet Union, and they were studying, and that's where I was born. And so basically, I was born and raised in Ukraine and the former Soviet Union, and I lived basically only with students, like in student apartments, most of my life. But also for the most, my mom was a single mom, like almost all of the period. So I was actually the only child to only woman from Chile. We didn't have any family and so on. So I actually also went to like a boarding school, you could say, like a for most of my friends in school were like either they didn't have parents or they lived with their grandparents, or their parents were like had some kind of troubles and so on. And yeah, and I was a single a child with a single mom who was studying a lot. So yeah, so I actually kind of lived in the school for most of the time, and I saw my mom sometimes like in the weekends, and because I it was kind of close to where we lived, so I could actually go home in some evenings and so on. But yeah, so I was brought up a bit in the school, you could say.
Gosh, that sounds so
Mm.
tough. But did you have siblings who were going through the same experience as you?
No, my sister, she was born when I was 8 years old, because I actually thought that I'm not gonna have any siblings. But then I had my sister came when I was 8, and she was like really small, so she went to like kindergarten and so on. And then we actually left. We left Soviet Union for Sweden when I was 12, 13 years old. So at that time she was about 4 years old. So she never went to school like me. She just went to and the kindergarten was closer to the home, and also my mom. It was easy for my mom to take care of both of us. So I I could always leave school and be home, if I wanted to. So it got easier when I got my sister. Yeah, and then we moved to Sweden. But
That
yeah,
must have
but I
been,
mean,
yeah,
yeah.
extraordinary transition. I mean, how was that moving
Yeah,
from
it
one to
was. I
the
mean,
other?
yeah, it was really crazy. And I was 10 years old, 86 when Chernobyl hit so we had to evacuate to the southern parts of it, like to the Azov Sea, actually, to be, and with all my class and my mom and my sister, they had to move somewhere else for a while. And then it was at the time. I mean, we were listening to like Europe, the Swedish rock band, like it was kind of forbidden to listen to music like that. It's like it's not like you could. So we were listening to it during the nights when all the people around us were sleeping, I guess. And from that, going to the country where Europe was from, it was like a big difference for sure. I mean, it was totally a different life, I would say, and
If it
different.
was, yeah, if it was forbidden to listen to even music from Sweden, was
Mm.
it also difficult to get out of Ukraine to go to Sweden? Presumably, no.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, my mom had to move because she couldn't stay because of her. She didn't want to be naturalized as a Soviet, because then she would never go back to Chile, where she's from.
Oh,
So we moved because of that, because it was the glasnost and perestroika time when there was lots of things going on, and you kind of could feel that something's going to change here. So yeah, so she kind of moved because of to be able to move back to Chile after a while. So yeah, and she had to decide. Like, I know. I think it took her like a month from when she decided to go, and until we left. So it was in the middle of the summer. It was in August, and I just finished my 6th grade and was on the way to the 7th grade, and suddenly my mom came back from she was working in Sweden and Norway, and then she came back and she said, we're gonna move. And then we had to move just after a couple of weeks.
right. And how was it
Yeah.
arriving in Sweden? I mean, what did you feel when you started living in this totally different country and different culture and new
Yeah,
school and
yeah. I was in the middle of my like teenage like puberty, so it was really lots of things going on, and it was a bit scary at times, but it was also very I was really happy to see a new country and to travel, and to to learn new language and to see new places. So it was both scary and yeah, and kind of, I was really curious in that way. So and living as a refugee for a while, and and it's also like a hard time, because we had people, when we lived like in a refugee camp, we had people who took their lives and stuff because it was really hard for them, and you as a kid, you were like, oh, what happened there? Like, oh no, somebody like jumped or something. It was yeah, it was kind of, it was scary and a bit a sad situation. But then when you went to school, there was some light stuff too, and especially when you got the permit after, what, 1.5 year or something. Then everything is, gets much easier, and then you think, okay, so we could have a future here, and everything opens up. And Sweden is a very good country in terms of schools, and well, it's actually changing to the worst, but it was really good with schools and so on. So I mean, I'm like a really good example on how I would say how you can go from, I don't know if we can say zero to hero, but something like that, just to have this. It's not an American story, but it's a Swedish story about how you can move from being a refugee to having to living in a house actually, and having good jobs and stuff like that, I guess.
It's amazing how the wheels have turned as well, and there you are now hosting a Ukrainian refugee family. That must be extraordinary.
Exactly. And we actually even when we were refugees and we got the permit, we were actually hiding some people in our apartment already at that time. So I think we've in my place before, with my mom, we had 2 or 3 families or people living with us for a while, and this time is actually the first time I have. Well, we had we had a small apartment before with my family now, but this time it's like a whole family that lives with us. Yeah, so I kind of understand them in a way. Yeah, of course.
What was the process like of getting the family to Sweden? I mean, I ask because here in the UK, we've taken in very few refugees, partly seemingly because I suppose our government is kind of, the system is very cumbersome and perhaps even obstructive, and there's maybe a lack of competence or even willingness from the government to take in more refugees. So I suppose we're interested in how other countries have been doing that.
Sure. I mean, in my case, was like we just got a call from an old friend, and then he told me basically. So I have this brother, and he happened to be in Poland when the war broke out, and his family there from eastern parts of from the Donbas region, and he's like, so he's in Poland with his family right now, and there are lots of people coming in. So we are wondering, they were thinking on going to Sweden. What do you think? And then I said, like, yeah, of course. I mean, we have a house; they can come, and we can see how we can help them. So it went really fast. It went from that call, and then I had like a day and talked with my family and with my children, and everybody was on board. And then 2 days later, they were here. So it went really fast.
Wow.
And I mean, at that time, or still, I think you could actually fly for free from Poland to Sweden. They were actually taking first they were trying to take a boat from Gdansk to Nynäshamn, which is close to Stockholm. But then they decided they could actually take a flight, and they did. And I met them up in the airport, and so they've been with us since then. It was like, I think it was in the beginning of March. It's like 1.5 months ago. Yeah, exactly.
That sounds a lot more straightforward than the UK system. But and how's it been going so far? I mean, it must be. I mean, the things that they must have experienced and gone through before getting there, and then the process of getting there. Like, it must be incredibly stressful and potentially traumatizing. I mean, how has it been thus far?
Yeah, it is traumatizing, but that's the crazy thing. I was kind of traumatized before they came in, but since they came, you kind of shift your way of thinking. You say, okay, so now my concentration is on them, and you listen to their stories. And I mean, because it's kind of rare to have the husband as well within the family, and he gets lots of questions about that, and some parts of his family say that he's a traitor because he's not going back. And one of the kids, he's 17 and a half, he's going to be 18 like in a couple of like in 1 month or so. And if he would be 18, he wouldn't be able to go. So and because he's a guy. So of course they have to think about that. And we just saying we understand that your first priority is your family, and then we try to support them what we can, I guess. But as I told you in the beginning, it helped me to feel better, and it helped me to focus, and helped me to start working again, I guess. But now I'm feeling again. Now they actually got the permit after like three weeks or something, not even that, 2 weeks or something, and so they have the possibility to start working now.
Oh,
So I actually found one work for two of them already, and they already asking, can we have pets, and stuff like that already. So it's like it went really really fast. And comparing to how it was when we came to Sweden, we had to wait at least 1.5 years to get the permit, and that time was really awful because you cannot work, you cannot do anything, just trying to learn some language, and you don't know even if you can be able to start to stay. And that brings a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. But if it goes as fast as it did here, I'm totally sure they will be really adapted really quick, because their English is already improved already. They already started getting to Swedish classes. Two of them have some work already. So it's getting so much faster, and the society is so much more open to that than, for example, when the Syrian, Afghan, and Somali people came, or when I came to Sweden, for example. So I think the civil society is much more open, much more fast, and the government is kind of also opening up. So I think they're gonna have an easier start, I think, actually, and that would be a really good thing.
Yeah, no, well, it shows what's possible, doesn't it, if there's the will? I mean, why do you think that is? I mean, do you think that there is an element of kind of racial prejudice, that Ukrainian refugees are being treated quite differently than other refugees?
That's for sure. I'm actually going to be in the panel, or I'm going to be moderating a panel later today, exactly about that. Who's the real refugee? And we're going to talk about that, how we feel it's been like the shift on how we talk about these people, what we do. For example, you could fly to Sweden for free, and you can also get all the transportation for free here. You just show your Ukrainian passport, and you can all transportation is for free, so they can get around in town without having any money, and only with their passports. And that's really, it's really easy. I mean, it gives you so much more freedom, for example. And there's other stuff also, like if you get a working permit after 3 weeks, it's you get started already. You can do some stuff, and you can get money. You feel secure already. You can start thinking, okay, maybe we should have an own apartment already. Everything goes so much faster if you open up, and the authorities, and the organizations from the employers organizations, they are thinking of different programs for the refugee people now, and so on. So I think it's much. I do think there's a racial thing going on, for sure. They're Christian, they're white, and they are I guess in a way closer physically also. It's not that far away from Sweden, and so on. We even have the same colors in our flags. It's like everything. Only in my street, which is a well-off area. It's a villas. In that street, only that street, we already have like 5 Ukrainian families. But it's a time when it was the Syrian, because we just moved from apartment to villa when the crisis was in 2015, 2016, and there were not even 1 or 2 families, I think. So I don't know. I cannot blame my neighbors for not being taken in, but I see a shift. I see a different kind of. We do treat people differently. That's really sad to see.
Yeah, and one thing you mentioned there about, obviously there is this Ukrainian government policy that men aged between 18 and 60 aren't allowed to leave the country. So I suppose that's one illustration of how gender clearly plays out, in wars in a big way. And obviously then that means you've got lots of women and children leaving the country as well. I mean, in a recent episode of our podcast, we talked to Paul Highgate about, militarism and masculinity as well. Lots of different ways in which gender and masculinity is kind of playing out in these kind of horrific conflict situations. So I was just wondering, like, from your perspective, what do you think are some of the ways in which a kind of masculinities analysis or perspective is relevant to what's going on at the moment?
I mean, I would say that's one of the most relevant things, because I mean, as you say, you can actually leave the country if you're a woman, or if you're children age, if you're less than 18 years old. But if you're a man, if you're 18 years old or older, and you're a man, you cannot leave the country. So that's a really, really big thing, and that's, as I told you before, also families split up. So the men are staying working or helping out with the war, and the women and children are fleeing, and that's it. And this is how it looks everywhere, I guess. So of course it's a really gendered thing. And I mean, and also with the war, you can hear the atrocities, the rapes and how they treat the soldiers and so on. It's really, really gendered in really many ways. And that's why the father the Ukrainian father living in the family, that's why he's been called a traitor also from even his family, like from his maybe not the closest, but from cousins and so on. And that's something that he has to live with, and he sometimes doesn't know if he should go back or not,
But is he over 60, Luis? Is he over 60? No, he's not. So how did he get out then?
Exactly. There are actually people who can get out. I've actually met some, but he was in Poland at the time. He just went for work in Poland 3 days or something, 4 days something before the war broke out. And then he was on the way back to get his family, to get to his family. But on the border, he had to talk with his father, and his father said, "You know what? Just wait for a day. Just wait for a day. We'll see. No, you never know." And during that night, his family called and said, "We are leaving." And he said, "Okay, so I'm going to wait for them here in the border." So I mean, that was literally just that phone call to his father made him not go over the border. And then he had to decide, okay, so now they're here safe with me in Poland. Should we go somewhere or should I go back? And then this is when he decided. This is when I got the call to Sweden, and I said, "Of course you can come." I mean, what can I do? I mean, I would do the same if I had the chance to save my family, and I'll probably do the same. I don't know, but I think so. That's I guess those are the really, really difficult questions and difficult decisions that we have to make in war, and that's what is awful, and that's very gendered, as you can hear.
Yeah, and I guess there's lots of ways in which, obviously, lots of men, for whatever reason, won't want to fight or won't be able to fight for all sorts of different reasons. But of course, we know that there is a lot of pressure on men, this kind of expectation that to be a kind of real man, the most idealized vision of masculinity perhaps is associated with militarism and being able to fight in wars and things like that, be this kind of hero. So I suppose on both sides, right? Also, we know that quite a lot of the Russian soldiers may be conscripts, and they're kind of forced to fight as well. Yeah. So just do you have any thoughts on that, I suppose, about how these kind of pressures and expectations around masculinity are shaping this conflict, I guess?
But I mean, you described it really well. But that's what happens. I mean, because it's like in your stereotypical way of being a man. That's what you have to do. That you have to stand up and fight for your country. But that's the thing. I mean, I've been thinking about it because there's lots of discussion in Sweden on what everybody should do. And actually, one of the party leaders from the Liberal Party, she had to step down because she said something like, hypothetically, that she was probably, if something happened, she would probably see her family, and then if she had to flee, she would flee to Norway. But she was like talking hypothetically, and then it was actually her fault because everybody, so you're gonna flee the country, and she's even a woman. So, but still, I mean, I guess that's what war does, it brings all this conservative and nationalistic and stereotypical views on display and on reality, and this is what all the politics are about too. So it's what we are discussing all the time here, about more weapons, more people inscripted in the army. Suddenly in Sweden we found billions of crowns to put in the military, but just in the pandemics it was we were fighting for every crown here, and suddenly we could actually find I don't know, even up to 5 billion crowns to more to the from in this year to the military or something like that. So it's like, it's everything is kind of crazy, I would say, and I guess that's what war does, even for us who are not like really not in the war but around the war.
And in terms of Sweden, that what you've just said, that also connects to a very significant issue about membership of NATO, doesn't it? Because I know that's currently being discussed, whether that should change as a result of Russia's actions. I wonder what you thought about that, because it's clearly a big debate.
Yeah, and I would say it's not even a debate anymore. I would say it's just almost like a reality, because all the people who are against NATO or are thinking, are trying to ask some critical questions about it. It's not even on the agenda anymore, and it's turning really really fast, and it sounds like Finland's going to be part and take the step already now in April, even maybe within next week or in May at least, and it looks like Sweden would follow, and it's going to happen in June. So it's like it's going really really fast, and the big Social Democrat Party are turning in this question, because they were against NATO, but now they actually turning. So I think it's I would almost say it's a reality, to be honest. It's like I'm part of the peace organizations and stuff that are actually talking about questions like that, and we don't have much to say. We don't have any party like in the parliament anymore who is against militarization or like less weapons. There's no party in not even the left or the ecological, like the Green Party. They are still saying that they're against NATO though. Right now, the Green Party might also turn,
Right.
but it's still, there's like no peace party left in the parliament anymore. Like the peace organizations are saying we don't have any allies and this is what's scary, because we are saying, okay, maybe we should, a decision like that maybe it should take time, and we should discuss it, and we should have maybe a referendum or something. But they say no, we're not going to have it, because referendum, the Russians can interfere. They can they can come with information and fake news or whatever, blah blah blah. So we cannot have it. And then I think it's actually we're not trusting our democracy anymore if we go that way. And we do have elections this year in September already. So it's a really really big thing, and unfortunately I would say the politicians are 80%, 90% are for the NATO, and the polls from the people, they're about 50% are for the NATO. So it's probably going to happen.
And how big a change does it represent, really? Because as I understand it, there has been cooperation between Sweden and NATO over the years. In any case, really. So I'm just wondering
of course.
How dramatic a shift is this?
Yeah, exactly. In one way, it's really dramatic, because Sweden has been neutral, not neutral. It's like alliance free, and we haven't been in war like for more than 200 years. And the Second World War was the same way. Like we started to stay neutral, like in a way, but we still cooperated with the United States and so on. So in one way, we do have operations with NATO. I have friends who've worked in the military that work with NATO and the States, but it's more of the in the diplomatic matter, in diplomacy, and in how we look at ourselves, what we can do, the palette of what we can do. It's getting more limited, and if we do get into NATO, we do the Social Democrats, they said no to the treaty about against nuclear weapons because NATO and the states said that would be difficult for them to get into NATO if they say to that ratification of that law, the UN ratification of against nuclear weapons, and now they're actually having it makes them easier for them to say yes to NATO. So it's like,
Right.
it's, I guess it's written in the stars already. But to answer your question, it's both very radical and also like inevitable in a way. It's like it goes both ways. But I think I'm actually surprised that not more than it's only 46%, I think, or something, that are saying they are for NATO, and actually the number of people who are critical to NATO is rising already. So in the beginning of the war, it was the other way around, and now it's actually the number of people who are deciding to say no to NATO within the people is rising. So it's but it's not, it's still less than 30%, and it's still 46% who are for NATO. And I think it's not going to be a maybe huge change in practicality, but I think it's going to be really a very, very big change in how the world see us, and how we see ourselves, and what we can do or not in the future, and what we can do for de-escalating the situation. I think this one, it's actually escalating really fast and hard.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that you're involved in campaigning from a feminist perspective, or for a party, I think, called the Feminist Initiative.
Yeah.
Presumably they have a position on this which is kind of anti-militaristic and so on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking. I have to be honest that I'm talking with from the political perspective, because I'm part of the party, and I'm part of the board of the party also. So, and I am actually the spokesman for the security questions as well, because for us security is like a human security. It's not about militarization. It's about men's violence. It's about like violence in the groups and individual, and also militarization and so on. Everything, it's like it's interconnected if you have this masculinities lenses on. So yeah, so I do speak from a position where we are the only party right now who is not for NATO, who's not for militarization, who's against sending weapons and stuff like that, and that's. Yeah, and we are, but we are outside the parliament, so we're not in the parliament. We don't have that much to say, and a very small party. But in the local, municipal, and regional levels, we can do some change. Like for example, in Stockholm, we have 3 seats in the municipalities parliament.
Do you want to say anything about the goals of the party and what sort of things it has achieved so far?
Yeah, because it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I suppose you don't actually see that many like explicitly feminist political parties. So I suppose we're quite interested in it from that perspective as well.
Yeah. I think you do have women's parties or something like.
We have a women's equality party,
Yeah.
yes, here in the UK, but it perhaps smaller maybe than the Feminist Initiative Party. Yeah.
So for the Feminist Initiative was born in 2005, 2006. I would say just by it applied pressure. Like if you have a feminist party and that you want to take seats, because there were lots of people from civil society organizations who are, and also in the parties, specifically like Social Democrats and the Left Party, they were pushing the feminist issues forward. And in 2014, we almost got into the parliament, because it's like there's a threshold, like a 4% threshold, and we had got 3.2 in the parliament, in the national elections. But that was also that year, 2014, where all the parties said they were feminist. So what happened was that there was like a massive feminist and anti-racist campaigning, and the Feminist Party pushed all the parties to be more feminist and more anti-racist. And this is actually when, in 2014, this is actually when the Social Democrat, the first government, said that they are a feminist government. So it's never happened in the world, I think. But they said we are feminist, and we have a feminist international like foreign policy program, like something like that. So, and they still say that we have a feminist, but it's like
What
this
does
is
that
where we
mean?
can. Yeah, and this is where we can hold them accountable. So in one way, it's really good if they say it. Okay, so what is feminist agenda then? What is the feminist foreign policy? What is the feminist policies for everything? So in this way, we actually achieved what we wanted in a way, our party. But of course, if you don't sit in the power, you don't have so much to say. So I mean, in the Stockholm area, where we got into 13 different municipalities, and the biggest ones were Stockholm, Gothenburg, Malmö, the biggest cities, Uppsala. So of course we do make a difference. I mean, everybody says that, Yesterday I spoke to an activist who was working, and she said, yes. So I was in this small municipality, and they told me that if Feminist Party wasn't there, they wouldn't have that money, the resources to have a women's shelter, for example, or stuff like that. So of course it matters if you have feminists and anti-racist people in the parliaments, but we are, as much as we have a party, we're also activists and educators, I would say. So we do have those three legs. We a party, we activists, and we educators. And many of us, like me, I come from the civil society, and I went into the politics because I said, we can be as big as really big. We can be talking to the minister of gender equality, for example, and they listening to us, and they trying to change. But we don't have people from the inside like that could actually apply pressure in the parliament, and put the votes there. So this is where I decided, no, it's not going to be enough to be working only with civil society. We need to be in the politician, where the politicians are, and where the money is, I guess, where we can actually use that power to take forward all the feminist questions that we believe in. So that, I think, it's crucial.
Well, that's interesting, because I suppose perhaps often from the outside, Sweden is perceived as being this like world leader, when it comes to gender equality. For example, in relation to fatherhood and parental leave and things like that. But I mean, last year we wrote a book, including with some Swedish colleagues, about men's activism to end violence against women, and that suggested that the situation's a bit more complicated. So, for example, that even though Sweden is perceived as being a very peaceful society, for example, violence against women does remain a major issue there, as has been illustrated by the Me Too movement, for example. We've also seen issues around men's violence more broadly, I suppose. Like, I think a few weeks ago were two teachers killed by a male student at a school, for example. So clearly there are big issues still with gender equality and male violence in Sweden. I mean, do you have anything to say about that? About, I suppose, the differences between this idea of Sweden and the reality?
Yeah, and this is where we work a lot, because there's a picture. We painted a picture in Sweden for a long time, and we've been one of the major countries pushing forward the feminist issues, the gender equality issues. But we kind of got stuck, I would say, in one way, and also there's a backlash against that. So this it's I would say it's both. It's the movement. It's both. It's like you have that still. We're still advancing in the forms of like paternity leave and so on. Now we actually have 3 months that are non-transferable, for example, so the parents, the fathers could actually have 3 months, and that makes even more fathers to take out parental leave on one hand. So in one hand, we actually have almost 30% of the parental leave days are taken by fathers. So that's a big step forward already. But on the other hand, you have 25% of all fathers don't take even one day, though you have actually a possibility to take up to 8 months of parental leave. And so we have 25% of men who don't take even one day. So that's a really, I mean, of course, maybe the day when, because in Sweden you have 10 days that when the child is born, and then you have 8 or 16 months to share. Yeah. So I'm talking about those 16 months after the child is born. From those months, there are 25% of men who don't take even one day. And I guess there's lots of things to do with that. I mean, this is why we have to see how we can change this, so we can help fathers, for example, because often sometimes they won't, but the culture at their place where they work, or the employers are not really looking at that positively. I guess more and more people are doing that, so it's getting better for sure. But then on the other hand, you have the backlash, and the backlash is like, no, let the parents decide themselves. Give the women the money so they could be with children up to 3 years, and they don't start the kindergarten. There's a backlash there, because then the women stay, and then they lose their chance in the their working place, especially women of color, or like with immigrant backgrounds. Maybe they don't get easily jobs, so they say, okay, it's better to get this allowance, so we can live, from one salary from my man. And then they really get difficult to get into the working, to work. So it conservates the gender gap is there. So there's a discrepancy between and how we think we are and the facts on the ground. And this is where we try to work in this field, because we try to show people, okay, it's really good that you want to be gender equal, and then you feel that we are gender equal, and blah 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 and so on. But look at these numbers. Look, why is it like that, and why it's like that, and what can we do to that? So we can hold them accountable against, like, on the individual level, but also on the political level. But again, the backlash is that we have the nationalist parties on rise. It's like almost 20% they have of the votes, and they are really, really conservative and reactionary, actually. And they don't even want to have the paternity leave, like the maternity. They just want to, and the abortion laws, they want they want to make it harder for women, and so on and so on. So they really, nationalists, they're really conservative and against gender equality, I would say. And they talk about this gender, like a gender ideology, whatever. And they say you are trying to like in schools or in kindergartens, they're saying, so you are like kind of ideologically brainwashing the kids to be what they not are. Let boys be boys and girls be girls, and so on. And then because it's in the curriculum, and that's what's really hard for them, because it's in the curriculum. You have to talk about gender transformative work and so on. So in one hand, again, we have laws, we have curriculums and stuff, which are really good, because they are actually been made up in the 90s and the beginning of 2000. But on the other hand, we have the backlash, and people are fighting this. And if we have a conservative nationalist takeover this September in the elections, we will have a real big backlash. Then the money will disappear from that. Probably they want to change the curriculum and everything. It's going to be really, really, really hard.
Yeah, and I suppose connecting to that kind of complicated picture, we have seen as well in recent weeks there have been some kind of riots seemingly taking place in some cities in Sweden after, I think, like an anti-Islamic political party from Denmark said they were going to, go and burn copies of the Quran in Sweden. And it seems like there have been a few kind of tensions of this kind in recent years. Of course, Sweden has taken in proportionally more refugees than most other European countries. But on the other hand, as you were saying, there's seemingly big issues with xenophobia, the rise of the far right. So I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on all of that, and are you trying to respond to some of these issues through the work that you do?
Yeah, of course. So first you have the picture about Sweden being really gender equal and feminist and so on, At the same time, we have a picture of Sweden being really anti-racist, really open-minded, really, So if there are surveys that show that people in Sweden, when you ask them, like, for example, if you would have a Muslim living with you, next to you, like as a neighbor, what would you do? Blah, blah, blah. And those numbers are really positive for Sweden. Sweden is really up there, being like open-minded, tolerating people or whatever. But if you look at the facts on the grounds, Sweden is really, really segregated. Like, for example, Stockholm. It's like yesterday I was in a debate in one part of Stockholm. There was 200 people in the venue, I was the only one who was a blackhead. I say, I was the only non-white people in that whole audience. Can you understand? And I was part of the party. But in Stockholm, there are numbers that show that almost 50% of the people in Stockholm are non-white people, like in this greater Stockholm. But in this area, I was the only one, and I came from another area. You understand? So the segregation is huge. And that's also, there is also discrepancy there from what we think we are, tolerant people, anti-racist, and how we do live and what we do. And there's lots of tensions there. And this is what happens with this riots, for example, because they go to areas where populated by people with immigrant background, lots of Muslim population, and lots of people who are maybe don't have jobs, maybe they live in poverty, and so on and so on. And there are some radical people too, of course. I mean, that's for sure. But what happens is that you don't, people. This is where I work. This is just here, outside here. And what happens is that people don't believe in the police. They are like really, police violence is against young people, for example. They are being searched and stopped all the time. So there's no trust into authorities. Yeah. So when the authorities comes, it's always something really bad. For example, in this case, they allowed this radical anti-Muslim or fascist actually person to make these things, and they knew that there was something going, and then the riots broke out, and it's 95% are young men that do this. There's actually more. The footage actually shows there are actually quite a lot of old men too who are like pushing the young men too. But it's mostly about young men, and the police is using the force that they can, and it gets accelerated, and it gets like more and more violent. So, and you have the national saying, look, we have those, they sometimes they say like it's not, they dehumanize people that live here. And then they say, this is not Sweden, this is not how we used to be, this is, look, you see what happens when you let all these immigrants to come in. But they're discriminated on the working place. They are discriminated in the living. They are discriminated in the social issues, and there's no like a society draws back from themselves. They don't have like the same support from the society. And then you have the backlash, like the violence that goes out, and that's like frustration, and it's actually inevitable in a way if you treat people like that. If you treat people like the Ukrainian people that comes in now, and you create possibility to work and blah blah blah, they probably not do that. But if you welcome people with distrust and saying they're so much more different than us, and so on, and you don't help the people to get in the job and everything, then you get distrust, and then it's really close to with masculinity norms, and with it gets explosive, I guess. And this is why it happened. And this is why everybody, now the police are saying, we're going to have more force. We're going to use more force. We're going to have water cannons, because we don't have that. We have the water cannons, and we're going to use this other equipment to they say we're going to meet force by force. So it's really escalating really, really fast.
Yeah.
I think time is marching on, but I wanted to ask you a slightly different thing, which does relate to what you've been saying, which is really where your own commitment to gender equality issues comes from. I mean, you've been working on those issues for so long. I mean, was that a sort of gradual awakening for you, or how did that happen?
Yeah. I mean, in one way, it was gradual. In one way, I always felt like I was a feminist in a way. It's like, growing up with a single mom in a country where you're not, she's by herself, and I met a lot of violence against her in different ways. You kind of feel like something's wrong with this world, with where men are being like that. So in one way, like, I guess, more on like a feeling, like a gut feeling. I was there. Ideologically, I was totally not there. And I was, I played rugby for 20 years, and I've been like really, I've been in really violent places and violent groups and so on, and used violence a lot, a way of, self-defense, but also like a way of being a man or whatever. But all the time since I came to Sweden, I was actually training young people in soccer and rugby, in different sports, and so I had that. I actually learned how to be, a good leader in a way. And then I actually had the possibility to be a sexuality educator in schools. And this is where I woke up, like, ideologically, and then it's about gender, it's about this and that, and this is where I felt, so my gut feeling and what I felt in my body, in my heart, kind of connected to what I learned in my head. It's like everything got connected, and since then I couldn't leave it anymore. I had to work with this.
Right.
So this is actually by accident when I came into this field by sexuality education, you could say.
Right. And so you must have grown up with rather a different sort of notion and discourse around gender equality in Ukraine, and then, this total reversal or change in transformation when you came to Sweden and started working in that field.
Yeah, but I mean, in Ukraine, I mean, the Soviet Union, I mean, in one way it was equal because I saw women and men working alongside each other, and it wasn't strange like that. There was other issues around that because I only saw women taking care of children and so on and so on. But in Sweden, it's the other way around. You have well, actually in Sweden you also have lots of women working in the workplace. So that was the same, but being a man meant more here. It's different stuff. It's less, I would say, it's less conservative in Sweden than it was in the Soviet Union. In Soviet Union, you were a father, but you were like not a father with kids, more like a father figure, and then you were like a fighter against the Nazis, and then you were like a worker. Those were the three male images. But in Sweden it was a bit more, you could see long hair man, and you could see more metrosexual man or whatever, there was slight difference just there. And there were more, I would say, I felt men were more softer, they were like not softer, I know, more caring, I would say, in a way, in schools, for example, and so on. So of course it's like I'm painting a really like stereotypical way, but it was a bit like that. I felt. So for me, it was always like I always felt that I could be. I had lots of males to look up to who are different. And that helped me to see that I don't have to be one way. I can be different ways.
Sure.
And that kind of helped me to land on the way and try to kind of work on the parts that I had to work on.
Yeah. And where does the rugby fit into that? Because you mentioned rugby a minute ago, playing and leading, and I mean, in a way, I'll probably get a whole load of letters and emails about this, but rugby could be seen as a sort of form of controlled violence, couldn't it? It's quite an aggressive game. Let's face it. It's a huge.
Yeah. I mean, but that's of course it is, and I mean, I also learned a lot about how to be a team, how to work together against a goal, how to feel this camaraderie, in a good way. But at the same time, we also sang women degraded songs. We were like, that's the double thing. I thought I was a good guy. I actually opened up so we could have a women's team, and that they would have the same chance for us to play rugby as us guys. And at the same time, I sang those women degrading songs. So you see, it's like a really double. You could feel like you're a good guy, but then you're not probably doing good things all the time. But if you start thinking about it, somebody questions this, or just asking, so but what do you really sing about? What does it mean? Then I would actually start thinking, oh yeah, by the way, that's maybe not that nice, But the thing is, nobody did. Like not trainers, not people listening to us. So I think this is why I learned just to asking questions like, by the way, what happened there? Just saying that it helps you to stop and start reflecting. Oh yeah, by the way, that maybe that wasn't that good, So it's like some kind of violence prevention is already there that I learned by myself.
And presumably there are groups working on sort of masculinized cultures in sport. I mean, there's certainly there's an organisation here in the UK, Beyond Equality, which has done a lot of work in this area, trying to address some of the things you've just been talking about.
Yeah, exactly. We have another organization started by really young guys called Locker Room Talk, where they work with young people in the locker rooms. Actually, like have before the training or after training, they have like a 20-minute talk about how to be a good sport. How to be a good a teammate, and about against homophobia, against sexism, and so on.
And I think we're actually being a bit modest here, because am I right in thinking you were in the national Swedish men's rugby team, Louise? Which seems like quite. I don't know how big rugby is in Sweden, but
it's really small. It's really small. but I did want to play in England actually, and I was young. I mean, I played until I was 30 years old. But I mean, I did learn a lot on how to. I started my feminist awakening journey while I was in rugby, and it was really good, because then I can see and point out the stuff while being in on that field and in that with those people and that culture, and again, I see lots of really really good things happening there too, and this is why I think for me it's really crucial that we are different kind of men again who are engaged in gender equality, because we have to be different, but then because we also can attract different kind of people. So the diversity of people in our field has to be bigger, and we have to be different kind of men who talk about this, because the young man would listen easily to me or to you, or to other people, if they can reflect themselves in us, for example. So this is why I'm trying to get different kind of people into this field, even though they don't feel like really feminists sometimes, or whatever. But I feel if they want to change, if they want to see the change, then we have to attract them. Then we have to open up and get them. Because I mean, if somebody hadn't opened up for me, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. So it has to start somewhere.
Fantastic. Well, unless you had anything else you wanted to say, Sandy, I think that's
I just wanted to thank you, Luis. That was incredible, really. I mean, your story is just so so extraordinary, so powerful, and I'm wondering how you've managed to come through it, really. But you have, and it's great. And it's great to have such a powerful advocate for gender equality issues and race issues, working with us. So thanks.
Thank you.
And you're clearly doing so much brilliant work. I don't know how you fit it all in, but
I don't know either. But I'm still standing, I guess. But we'll see.
Oh, well, thank you so much for talking to us.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was an extraordinary conversation with Luis. When you think about the experiences he's had during his life, there's a great sense of him being a survivor, really, but also a fantastic contributor. He's a great communicator, and he seems to have his finger in so many different pies. I can hardly believe it. I mean, I feel exhausted even thinking about how his life must work in practice. But we normally do our little sort of summary of what we think afterwards, and listeners might be amused to know that the first thing that we talked about was Swedish cinnamon buns, which came into our conversation in a rather sort of random way. But leaving that aside for one, being serious, what did you make of the conversation we just had, Stephen?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, really, Sandy. I was very moved, really, to hear Luis talk about. I mean, yeah, as you say, he's a hugely impressive person. He's a real asset to our movement. All the work he does is so inspiring. But I suppose, yeah, you can't help but be affected by the fact of what he was saying about, as you say, everything he's experienced, and now seeing his country of birth just being totally destroyed in this horrendous war that it's in. Which, of course, is so relevant to us who are, talking about and looking at issues of gender and masculinity, because ultimately, war is, I suppose, in one way of looking at it, it's kind of male violence writ large, right? It's usually men in positions of power sending other men, especially like working class men or men from ethnic minority backgrounds, to die, to kill other men. and that has just these horrendous outcomes. But of course, it's also a lot more complicated than that, because of course women and children are hugely impacted in all sorts of ways as well, whether that's civilians being targeted by bombings, or sexual violence being perpetrated against women, for example, but also women play an active role in all sorts of ways as agents in war and in conflict as well. And we're certainly seeing that in Ukraine. Obviously there is this policy that men can't leave Ukraine because they're expected to stay and potentially fight. But of course, lots of women are actually fighting, defending Ukraine as well, and that needs to be recognized, I think. But also, of course, resistance to this mass violence takes lots of different forms. It's not just about physical violence either, right? You can resist in all sorts of different ways. Simply surviving is a form of resistance, you could argue, for the Ukrainian people. So obviously I think women are actually articulating that kind of resistance in lots of different ways as well, which is really important to acknowledge.
And the other interesting thing he raised there was about the family that have come to stay in his house in Sweden, and obviously there is this issue about the men between certain ages up to age 60 having to stay in Ukraine to fight. But the dad in that situation is now in Sweden with his family. And, it just didn't occur to me that, of course, as Luis described, well, he was outside Ukraine when the war broke out, and he didn't go back into Ukraine, and he waited his family, and they then moved to Sweden. And it was so interesting and kind of humbling to hear how much help the family were receiving in Sweden from Luis, but also from the official agencies, I think, and how they were setting up work and all this kind of thing. And in one way, you think, well, they're kind of set up for the long term there. But at the same time, I was thinking, yes, but they don't really know what's going to happen in Ukraine. Maybe they want to go back. What have they got to go back to? And also this key issue that Luis raised of how the dad is seen by some as a traitor. And that might be a reason why he might not want to go back to Ukraine at all, if he's going to be vilified for not fighting. So there were some major issues in there, actually, I thought.
Yeah, the kind of white feather thing that, and this connects to what we were saying, is that men can be convinced and pressured to do these horrendous things, to kill other people in wars. And masculinity plays a big part in that pressure, those expectations that if you don't participate in that, you're a coward, you're not a real man, and all of these things.
Yeah. I mean, another issue which I thought was really interesting was what he had to say about rugby, actually. The whole issue about locker room talk and how that plays out. And, I think he described some kind of awakening, actually, as a result of being involved in those situations. So perhaps it had a good outcome for him. But just raising that makes you think of how much there is to do in that sphere. And I do wonder, I think maybe we should perhaps consider doing an episode around not just rugby, but other sports as well. And there's another issue in there which is quite current here, is the whole one of concussion, brain injuries, and so on. Actually, men's health issues are part of a discussion of men's sports as well. So it just occurs to me that would be an interesting dimension to look at some point.
And actually, one other thing which I just wanted to mention as well, actually, thinking about what we're talking about refugees, because you can't help but think about how the UK is treating refugees, and how much Sweden is doing, and many other European countries. But the UK has taken in so few Ukrainian refugees, and of course now we've got this new policy where the UK government is trying to send people seeking asylum to Rwanda, and there's this gender element playing out there as well, that apparently they're only going to be sending young men to Rwanda, which is kind of well, can't young men be vulnerable and in desperate need of help as well? And actually, what does it do to separate families in that way? So yeah, I think it's actually quite shameful, when you look at how our country is responding to this question of refugees. Unless there was anything else you wanted to say, though, Sandy, I think we'd better call it quits there before we keep talking for any longer. But thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and speak to you next time.
Yes, and don't forget to seek out our previous episodes if you haven't already. Contact us at nowamen@gmail.com if you'd like to ask questions, make suggestions. Do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Yeah, and have a look for a cinnamon bun. They're very nice.
Yeah, they really are, especially the Swedish ones. Thank you. Bye.